I hope that by the show of hands earlier that folks understand and know a little bit about what Sigstore is. That's why you're here today. But I always like to kind of reset around why does Sigstore exist? What is its mission? And it turns out our mission statement's too long and too wordy to put on a single slide. So I wanted to just really to highlight some of the key terms that stick out to me. Number one, it's around verifiable and transparent integrity. You know, we used to have a nice meme that said, sign all the things, but signing all the things isn't really when you extract value of a system. It's really about verify all of the things, right? So it's this verifiable word that sticks out here in that we want all of the artifacts that flow in open source to be verifiable. And that ultimately there's a lot of people that will go to a package manager and just do pip install something, and they're making an implicit decision that they're just blindly trusting whatever is in an upstream repository. We want to make that trust decision more explicit so that people actually understand what is it that they're downloading, and that the right things generally do happen by default, but we want that trust to be made explicit, and so that people can actually make more informed decisions about what they ingest into their software. And so Sigstore kicked off a little over 4 years ago. Luke's first commit had the Ahoy Captain tagline on it, and ever since it's been an incredibly crazy experience where we've seen a massive growth in contributors, we've seen a massive number of projects, and just really a very vibrant, healthy community. And so it's really come together on the effort of many individuals. But it's also, you know, again, we didn't invent a new cryptographic algorithm with Sigstore. What we really did was we put together technologies that were battle tested maybe in different domains and actually applied them together to solve the challenge of applying digital signatures at scale within the open source ecosystem. Technologies like OpenID Connect for identity, some of the advances in workload identity from projects like Spiffy and Spire, a lot of investment from the update framework, a lot of the background and kind of decades worth of experience of certificate transparency in the ecosystem that exists around transparency logs, and a lot of innovation of late around confidential compute. Sigstore really ties these components together in a modular architecture where its value is really unlocked for the user. And you know, in terms of where are we today before we get to the future, Sigstore is healthy, adoption is increasing. When I was pulling the stats for this, over 2023, we were averaging about 3.5 million log entries a month. We've now more than doubled that rate over the last 3 months. So over 8.8 million entries are being put into the log. So those are the signing events from the CI workflows on GitHub or GitLab. Those are the entries where folks are actually publishing artifacts, publishing releases up to the registries themselves, signing their SBOMs, signing their binaries. So those are what those entries fundamentally represent. We've also seen Sigstore be natively integrated within a major feature launched on GitHub called artifact attestations. And this is really part of our overall strategy, which is to go where the places where people are developing software and to do the hard work of integrating it in the correct way so that everybody can take advantage of the technology. As part of that, we do run our own, what we like to call our public good infrastructure. These are services that we run on behalf of the internet. That is managed by an on-call team of volunteers, represented a few folks here in the room I see from the on-call rotation. We've continued to maintain and exceed our SLO for that infrastructure, and we've really done that, and again, in a very community-driven way. So it's really, I think, exciting to see the growth that we have observed both in the sheer adoption of the technology, but also looking at many of the popular language ecosystems that exist. NPM was one of our first launch partners, but we've actually expanded that through a lot of work with the Python Foundation, some recent work with the Ruby Central folks, some engagements with Maven Central, and a great engagement with the Homebrew community, where all of the bottles that are centrally built as part of Homebrew are actually built on GitHub Actions. So it was a very nice kind of merger together of the technology stacks where we could use that centralized build to generate build provenance, sign it with Sigstore, and then publish that provenance out so that folks could actually see, when I do a brew install, where is the source code that actually generated that bottle that I'm downloading to my system. It doesn't guarantee that there's not malware in it, but it does give you a strong link to what is the source of truth, which is, again, a really important part of the overall supply chain problem, is just knowing and trusting the visibility that you have within the system. And when we think about where is Sigstore going, when I pulled together the first draft of the roadmap, I kind of started by writing some words down that would convey the sorts of properties that Sigstore would have more durably into the future. And I won't read all these terms out, but I think certain ones here around seamless, reliable, privacy conscious, these are words that I think convey the vision of where we want to take Sigstore in the long run. All of these things I think we want generally to hold true, and it requires contributions from folks writing code. It requires contributions from others in the community to help operate the infrastructure. It takes engagement with the research community and the academic community to really push the envelope around how we can actually represent these systems at scale and do so in a privacy conscious way. We have a lot of users that are using Sigstore in their own internal infrastructure. And so making sure that we have the right level of automation, the right level of simplicity, yet flexibility for folks that want to run and utilize this in their own environments. We want to make sure that we're flexible enough for them to use Sigstore in those use cases while also meeting the needs of the upstream developer in a variety of open source communities. So in terms of where are we going in the future? In 2025, we're going to continue to invest and drive adoption within the major language ecosystem. So we're almost done with a release of a couple different PEPs within the Python ecosystem that will really dramatically improve the coverage that we have within Python. We're going to continue to work with the NPM community to drive greater adoption of actually publishing build provenance as part of their native workflows. We're going to continue to partner with Ruby Central and the Ruby community to land the RFCs that they've developed and the code that they've developed and donated to the Sigstore community around our Ruby client SDK. We'll move our homebrew project from beta into GA, and we'll continue to work with our partners like GitHub and GitLab and the other CI providers to make sure that we're very well connected on the platforms that folks are using. We're also going to expand into a number of different use cases. One of the projects that we added earlier this year within the Sigstore community is something called model transparency, and there will be a talk by Mihai a little bit later today on this, but it's really about how do we bring that digital signing and verification capability into the AI workflows that folks are getting so excited about. At the end of the day, if I'm downloading a model from a hub like Hugging Face or Kaggle, it's really no different from me downloading a random binary off the internet and running it. I want to know, is the integrity of that artifact valid? Who was the actual author of that? How do I bind that back to an identity? And think about how do we actually build that verification flow into the model frameworks itself. So it's an area where we've seen some excitement within the community. We've seen some new contributors come, and we want to continue to do more around that. Another topic that we're going to continue to invest in is around continuing to improve the modularity and the flexibility where it makes sense. One of the points of feedback that we've heard from many of our users is that, hey, a lot of the, for example, the KMS plugins that we interoperate with, we have great support for AWS, Google, Azure, but there are also a larger number of KMS and signing providers that folks want to interoperate with. Like any big open source project, we have to balance how much of that we pull into Tree and how much of that responsibility we take within the community, but also how do we enable folks to leverage the technology stacks that they have, again, and to extract the value of Sigstore. So we've started some work to actually provide a new plugin layer for those KMS plugins so that people can write their own and manage that in a more sustainable way for both the end user as well as for the community. And also we're investing more in actually building out and enriching the verification experience. I think from the early days of Sigstore when we were like, hey, let's go through and we're going to sign it with our email address, and people got really excited about how simple that was. That's great, but when we think about the end story of, well, how do I actually know who is supposed to be the author of the software? In some cases, it's the developer identity that will carry through. In other cases, it's the identity of the CI workflow that will carry through. In other cases, it's a legal entity that has their own identity that we need to work to verify. So making sure that we have better documentation and better structured information for how people should think about their verification workflows and then building that into the tools is something we're going to continue to focus on in 2025. And then finally, we want to continue to invest in the infrastructure, making sure that it's scalable, flexible, and easy to use. One of the big areas that we're going to invest in next year is an overhaul of the backing transparency log technology that we've been using. Thanks to a partnership with another team at Google named Trust Fabric, as well as an ecosystem of contributors and partners in the transparency log ecosystem, there's been a new kind of pivot in the technology stack there towards what are called tile back logs. And these are fundamentally simpler to operate. They actually leverage object storage rather than relational databases for the bulk of what they do. And we think that that also will provide a more simplified experience for folks that run Sigstore logs, whether that be us as the public infrastructure team or whether it's individual users. And we're going to continue to drive that translation and add more scale, more resiliency to the infrastructure that we have. We recognize that as part of the great success that we've had in driving adoption within these ecosystems, we're becoming more and more fundamentally critical to the overall posture of the supply chain of the world and of the open source ecosystem. So we have to continue to invest to rise to the occasion to make sure that we meet the needs that are out there. So I know Hayden also gave a quick shout out to all these categories. I also want to say thank you to all of you, especially our users, those who give us feedback, jump in and ask questions on the Slack channel, open issues. It's a vibrant part of what we do. We anticipate many of the design questions and use cases, but we certainly can't anticipate them all. And it's by you all giving back, you all collaborating through those issues and those Slack channels is really how we make Sigstore what it is today. So thanks to all of you. And again, thanks to all my fellow contributors and maintainers, as well as a quick shout out to the on-call team who doesn't get a lot of love. And when we do our job well, nobody knows that we're there. But it was certainly appreciated that those folks do volunteer their time to hold the pager and support all of the effort that we have today. So with that, thanks for the time. And I guess I will hand it over to Luke next.